Hey, North Park Community Church, Pastor Luke here with another episode of First Looks. And today we'll be taking a first look at Jonah chapter 1. Maybe just a quick comment that Jonah is one of those Sunday school specials that if you were ever a part of the church in any way growing up as a kid, you likely are familiar with this story. There's a handful of just, you can count on it. You heard it. David and Goliath, Daniel in the lion's den, Jonah in the belly of the fish. And while it is a good thing to have familiarity with some of the really staple stories of the Old Testament, one of the risks that goes along with that is that we never progress beyond maybe that Sunday school rendition of this book, and we can sometimes make the main thing in Jonah be his time inside the belly of the fish. And when we do that, we really miss out on a lot of the depth and the beauty, the profundity of this letter. This is, I should just get going. I should just get into the text here. I'm going to spend too much time. But this is genre-wise. Let me go back. Genre, I'm just not writing well today, it's a prophetic book. It is a narrative, meaning we're getting a story here, and it is also it has a level of literary technique that gets that's almost poetic in a sense. It's not straight Hebrew poetry, definitely not that. But there is something poetic in the literary techniques that are being employed here. So we do want to make note of the maybe I'll put poetic, but just hear all the words I'm saying. It's not straight poetry, but poetic literary technique. And that's more of like an epic sense, not not maybe the metaphor. It's not that. It's more of this. We would think of some of the Greek epic poems where they're narrative based, but they're heavily laden with select word choice and thematic elements, and that's certainly present in Jonah, no doubt about it. While I do take the historic traditional view that this is a literal story, something that is questioned these days. Nevertheless, the choice of language and literary technique that's used here in the writing out of the story is very intentional, very intentional. One of the things that you'll want to be sure to notice is word. Oh, what am I doing? Word repetition. Okay, word repetition. So with that, let's start just walking through it, and we'll start to make some of these connections here. First one that I just want to highlight here. Now, the word of the Lord. This is like classic prophet classic prophecy language, came to Jonah, the son of Amittai. Jonah, his name, dove, son of faithfulness. And so if you're familiar with Jonah, he is not so peaceful and innocent like a dove at all. And the son of faithfulness, let's read the next line and see what happens there. And God says, arise. Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me. Okay? There's a really important note here that I want to make. Their evil has come up before me. Literally, the Hebrew is before my face. Before my face. Okay. Hang on to that. But Jonah arose. Jonah rose to flee. All right. So arise and go, and he arose to flee to Tarshish. Let's do a different color here. To Tarshish. Oh. One day I'll get this straight for you all. I'll go there. To Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. But Jonah went down to Joppa, found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. Okay? So let me make another note here. There's some more that we got to find out, that we got to make note of. The presence of the Lord. Guess what it is? Literally, the Hebrew is from before my face. And then, look down there. It says it again. To go with them to Tarshish, away from, right here, before the face of Yahweh. So what that is, whenever you have the capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D in your Old Testament, you're seeing the covenant name Yahweh. And so that's what this is right here. It's the same thing. All right. Now, one more thing that I want to highlight as a repeated word here is God says to go up to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up from before my face. But Jonah arose to flee from the presence of the Lord. He went. Oh, I did it again. Here we go. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare and he went down into it to go with them, away from the presence of the Lord. We're going to see a lot more of the going down, but just right here in these first couple verses, we see a lot of the thematic repetition that will be just continued on in the rest of this, the rest of this chapter. The other comparison that I just want to make right now. Compare Nineveh is going to be judged because their evil is before God's face. Okay, so God's face is synonymous with his presence, being in his presence. Their evil has come into his presence, and therefore he sends Jonah to go call out against them. And but notice where Jonah is running. Jonah flees God's face, or in other words, God's presence. All right, the presence of God. We'll see how well that works out for him. Okay. All right, good. Tarshish is repeated 3 times here. That's something that is noteworthy. Tarshish is furthest point west away from Nineveh. It is on the southwestern corner of the country of Spain, just outside of the Straits of Gibraltar, which take you into the Atlantic Ocean, which was the end of the world for these people, and in their understanding of the world. That was it. There wasn't anything after the Atlantic, and so that was kind of the end of the functional world for them. And so that's one point that we want to make about Tarshish. Now, Tarshish is also spoken of quite poorly in rest of OT. Solomon will want to do business with them, but it's when he's just kind of taken the empire to, or the Israelite nation to kind of a financial prosperity, but the way in which he's getting there is ultimately going to end in his ruin, and that involves some of his dealings with ships from Tarshish. But in other places in Ezekiel, it will prophesy against Tarshish and not speak well of it. And so that's something else that we'll want to make note of, do a little bit more investigation on. Okay, here we go. Now, the Lord, he hurled, get new color here. The Lord hurled, I did it 3 times. The Lord hurled a great windstorm upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so that the ship threatened to break up. Then the mariners were afraid, and each cried out to his God, and they hurled the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten it for them. But Jonah had gone down into the innermost part of the ship and had lain down and was fast asleep. So the captain came to him and said, "What do you mean, you sleeper? Arise, call out to your God. Perhaps the God will give a thought to us that we may not perish." Okay, and then we have great up here as well. A great wind upon the sea came about. And then we also want to start to make note of another important word in this. There was a mighty tempest on the sea, so the ship threatened to break up. Then the mariners were afraid. Each cried out to his God. Yes. Okay, so now we start to trace a couple themes here. fleeing God is going down. And this is going to have language of Sheol, the Hebrew word for the place of the dead. What we see happening in the narrative is Jonah descending and descending and descending thematically in the story, which is a way of saying he is on the way to the place of the dead. He's on his way to death. He is descending to death in his fleeing from God. And then we're also going to see the theme of fear of God. We're going to see that one as a pretty significant theme as well, in which fear of God leads to how would I want to put this? A desire leads to being in his will. And conversely, no fear is why one would avoid his will. We'll need to flesh that out a little bit more. Think through it a little bit more. Okay. Okay. Also, one last comment here is look at what God says. Arise. Get another color. All right. Up here in the top. And I'll have to think through this more, but there is almost the mariners. They're almost exhorting. Well, let me go back. Let's say mirroring. They're God's command. So Jonah is going down. God calls him to arise. The mariners call him to arise. The mariners say, arise and call out to your God. And I think that there's something that we should make note of in that. As we just kind of trace these themes, even further. So, all right, let's go on. And so they said to one another, come, let us cast lots that we may know on whose account this evil has come upon us. Okay. So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. Then they said to him, tell us on whose account this evil has come upon us. What is your occupation? It's a strange question. Strange question there to lead out with that. Where do you come from? What is your country? And of what people are you? And he said to them, I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. And so here we go. I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. The sea is his problem right now. All right. Then these men were exceedingly afraid. Let me see what my fear color is here. Orange. Oh, right. We just did that one. They were exceedingly afraid. Let me highlight this right here. Exceedingly. This is Hebrew is gadol, which means great. So actually I should erase this from the orange because we have another theme at work here. And I think there was another exceedingly that I missed out on. Oh yes, here we go. So this is where English translations aren't helping us out here. So this is Hebrew gadol. Again, that means great. And I think there was another one where a great wind. Okay, so let me get my green highlighter here. So green. Okay, for your Lord, and they were exceedingly afraid. Okay, good. Okay, and they said to him, "What is this that you have done?" For the men knew that he was fleeing the presence of the Lord. He's fleeing. He's going down. And notice this, from the presence of the Lord. Let me look this up real quick. Yeah. Right there. Hebrew. Literally. From before God's face, the face of Yahweh. Because he had told them that this was the case. Yeah. Okay. So then he said, "What shall we do to you that the sea may quiet down for us?" There's a lot of personification here in this, where with the sea quiet down for us. We see up here that the sea is considering it. It's threatening. It's actually considering, contemplating breaking up. That's the ship, excuse me. And now the sea is perhaps it shall quiet down for us. For the sea grew more and more tempestuous. Okay. And he said to them, "Pick me up and hurl me into the sea." Where's our hurl? Purple. Okay. Pick me up and hurl me into the sea, and the sea will quiet down for you. For I know it is because of me that this great tempest has come upon you. Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to get back to the dry land, but they could not, for the sea grew more and more tempestuous against them. Therefore they called out to the Lord. "O Lord," they said, "O Lord, let us not perish for this man's life, and lay not on us his innocent blood. For you, O Lord, have done as it pleased you." So they picked up Jonah, and they hurled him into the sea, and the sea ceased from its raging. And then the men feared the Lord exceedingly. Gadol, great. And they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows. So again, this is great. Gadol. Okay. And they made sacrifice to the Lord and made vows. And the Lord appointed what kind of fish? A gadol fish. A gadol fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Okay. Wow. There's quite a bit to say here. Okay. So we're looking back up at the themes up there and we see the theme. Where do I want to kind of put this? Of the fear of the sailors lead to it leads them to worship. Look what they do. They plead for God not to lay his innocent blood upon them. They recognize that that this is what pleases the Lord, that if Jonah throwing him in there is what calms the sea, then they're submitting to that. Really, they're recognizing that the Lord is the one who hurled the storm, and to calm the storm, they'll need to hurl Jonah into the sea. And so we see that their fear leads them to offer sacrifice and to make vows. That offering sacrifice is the same language as the Hebrew worship of offering sacrifices. So these guys were, they were pure pagans going into this situation, no doubt about it, pure pagans. But it seems like there is a level of genuine response to God and the message of the storm. We will want to remember this to compare with the response of the Ninevites in chapter 3. There again, we see pure pagans. Pure pagans. They don't get much worse than the Assyrian Ninevites. But they have ears to hear, and at least in the moment, they have hearts that respond to the message of God. And Jonah continually seems to fail at that. And so we want to track that, but look at how, when Jonah talks about himself, he says, I'm a Hebrew and I fear the Lord God of heaven. But in his there is no evidence of this being more than mere lip service. Okay, and then let me just make one other note here as well. Where it went down. Let me get my yellow. All right, and Jonah was in the this right here. It's not using the language, but this is describing a descent to darkness and death. Going into the belly of a fish is that's as close as you get as going into the grave without actually going into the grave. And so this is like the just the pinnacle of his descent is into death. And I'm not going to go any further than that, because that's next week's message, when we see that his descent into death is actually the fertile ground in which life springs up of repentance. Again, perhaps not to the level that it should in how we see him respond in chapters 3 and 4, but there is that. We see the mercy of God even in a fish and in this situation. So we want to trace a couple more things here. We looked at fleeing from God. I'm looking over here. Fleeing God is like going down into death. Fear of God leads to being in his will. And And so we see that the fear of the sailors lead them to worship. And I think that that's a safe place to say is in God's will. We also see, who is it? C.S. Lewis, who calls it the hounds of heaven that seek us, that seek us down. With I don't, maybe it was Lewis again, with a severe mercy. There's mercy in the fish, but it is severe. There's mercy in the storm, because even though they are dangerous and difficult, they are used by God to grab his prophet back to himself. And so, okay, I think I've said everything I want to say about this right now. These themes are, it is honestly just, I think just a bit premature right now for me to develop this anymore. The themes are present in the repetition of words, great, fear, the hurling of God and the hurling of Jonah, the arise versus the going down. There is depth here beyond probably what is wise for me to speak at the current. I'm gonna need some time to pray and to process and to simmer on this before I want to take these themes further into what will become the sermon on Sunday. So with that, thank you for listening, and I hope that this illumines the depth of this this piece of literature that is not merely a piece of literature. It is a God-inspired revelation for us, for his people, for all time. And so it is deep, it is profound. Let us have open ears and open hearts to that the Spirit of God might take us to mine new riches in this familiar book of Jonah. So, all right, I'm done chalking, and God bless you, and we'll see you Sunday. Love you, church.